So Joe Bianco said at one point that we asked, was Barney a narcissist? Because as you could see, he had a plan, and he had a planette. And Joe said that Barney wasn't in love with himself, he was in love with ideas. Barney was also, as you can tell in this movie, a rebel. What we could not fit in, because it just didn't fit, was that he was a man of contradiction. His father was Jewish, his mother was Irish Catholic. And he told the story about how he didn't fit anywhere. And he thought that censorship was an issue, it was a class issue, as well as a legal issue. And he saw the people who had the power to censor reading as the same people who were trying to keep women, keep racial groups, keep the disenfranchised, just where they were. And he wanted to break open that mainstream.
He was very much the curator of the sensibility, aesthetics, and intellectual issues of the 1960s. And he was really, I mean, there was such a massive amount of material that was out there and on the table, and that he was able to find his way to these texts. When he was a teenager, he was going out with the daughter of a fellow named, I don't have his whole name, but his name was Lovett. And Lovett was a writer who had published several books and taught at the University of Chicago. And in 1946, the House of Un-American Activities brought him up before the DICE committee, the DIES committee, and he was expelled from his teaching profession. He was expelled from society, basically, and Lovett fought it in the Supreme Court. This was the grandfather of Barney Rossit's girlfriend in high school.
Oh, wow.
And so there's a kind of rosebud key there that he was very much impacted by his early loves, this high school sweetheart who he loved, and Joan Mitchell. And they very much, in a way, he declared himself in high school a communist. He was co-editing that high school.
Against everything.
Anti-everything.
You know, how can you disregard any part of human activity as something? And that's something that I really think honed on to as well, and really was so inclusive and so such a role model on that level.
We had many wonderful interviews with Astrid, who really is magnetic, as you can see on screen. And she said at one point, Barney just really didn't care about money. He didn't think about money. He liked to spend it. Part of that may have come from just having so much money when he grew up. His father was very wealthy. But at the same time, he kind of resented that. It was a very deep conflict in him.
Yeah.
But no, he was a fighter. He fought.
When I look at those books, I never knew Barney Rosset. I came to New York too late and wasn't hip enough. But but growing up in the 70s and 80s, really in the 80s, and my after-school job was working in a used bookstore, I of course got to know the Evergreen Review. And growing up in Washington, D.C., in the city, everyone in a band, if you were in a band, you also had a paperback in your pocket. And if you had a paperback in your pocket and you were in a band, it was probably something, sooner or later, that came from Grove Press. And that's what I mean, it's easy to miss a lot of things about the New York that was. The thing that this movie makes me nostalgic for is the moment when a kid who thought of herself or himself as artistic or rebellious, and with it had a book in her pocket.
I think Barney would probably defend those who, he wouldn't try and force anything on anybody. He really just wanted the right of an individual to read and the right of an artist to create. And you can make your choice as to what you want to read or what you want to teach. It gets very slippery when, as you saw with obscenity, when you have a person designated to say that something's obscene or that something is wounding, and only one person saying that, it can lead on that spectrum from complete safety, from offensiveness on one hand, to outright expression of bigotry and free ranting on the other. And so I think what we are having to deal with as a culture now is neither or black or white, but along the spectrum, where is one comfortable? But Barney would say, when you say you're going to censor a book or censor an artist's imagination, that's he would still be fighting that fight.
But we're having this discussion now anyway. It's just not government censorship. It's a cultural censorship.
There's economic censorship.
But there's also a soft censorship. I mean, Louis C.K. is finished. I am told that HBO has taken off their network anything that's Louis C.K.
And House of Cards.
Kevin Spacey is finished. House of Cards, there was a film. Senator Franken may be finished. So yes, it's not the government, but it is a form of censorship. It's a cultural censorship. Maybe it's an economic censorship. And I'm wondering whether, in the spirit of this night, watching this film, in which smut and perversion and the avant-garde and the anti-establishment and the counterculture was celebrated, that we're living in very confusing time.
What we saw in the film was a very strong publishing list. And I don't mean to interrupt, but you're right, of course, that everything has changed about publishing. Everything has changed. But the Paris Review has lost money every year since it was founded. And that doesn't seem to be changing anytime soon. And we rely on the generosity of donors to keep us doing what we do. I think, and just to speak from my experience at the Review, we also have more readers in print than we ever had before. So even by a factor of 2 or 3 from the golden age. So it can be, I think it's easy to be demoralized for the wrong reasons, because it's not that people don't read anymore, it's that you can't corner the market anymore. And a Grove Press would now have many competitors, because there's no book that no one will publish anymore, you know. And so I think a lot of us are flourishing in our way. It just doesn't have quite the éclat that Grove did, and no one probably ever will.
And actually, Grove did lose, in a way, lost its éclat because so many. Ironically, Barney had opened the market for freedom to publish, and so as soon as that happened, other publishers with more money, because by that time Barney was he really struggled. He'd lost a lot of money. He had to sell Grove finally, so he opened the market for everybody else.
I published in the Evergreen Review online version, and Astrid will remember this, an essay called "The Electronic Book Burning," in which I likened the internet, kind of the Silicon Valley people to the National Socialists in their condemnation of the use of paper and printing of books. You know, there's this whole, they call it bound dead trees. That's their term for books. And so, you know, I discussed the book is an artifact, is a sacred artifact, and the fact that people have given up their lives to preserve books. And I likened this kind of progressive, forward-looking Silicon Valley view as, you know, akin to the National Socialists, who are also, many of them, idealists and looking to forward to a better world without books and Jews. And so this article was published, essay was published in the Evergreen Review, and the backlash, and I'm sure Astrid remembers the backlash against that essay. I mean, just a little Evergreen Review online was astonishing. I mean, it was attacked in the Atlantic Monthly. It was attacked in Newsweek. It was attacked in every major publication. Just one little essay suggesting, intimating that there might be something a little bit wrong with internet culture. I mean, they're self-policing, you know. And if you cross them, you're doomed.